Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second in a series of live stream Kilowatt Talks events for Holy Cross Energy members. I'm Bryan Hannigan. I'm President and CEO of Holy Cross Energy, your electric cooperative. Now, many of you are familiar with our in-person Brats and Kilowatts events that we hosted prior to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, where with a beer in your hand and a brat on your plate, you had the opportunity to learn about all of the things that we're doing here to provide safe, affordable, and reliable electricity in our community, and some of the new projects and programs that were underway at the time. And we look forward to restarting those events very soon as we're starting to get back together in our communities. But in addition to those in-person events, we're pleased to offer you these online virtual events for those that prefer to learn about the latest at your electric cooperative in that way. We saw quite a few of you at our annual meeting just a few weeks ago in Carbondale, and we were thankful for all of you who came out. Just a reminder that those videos and presentations from that day, if you missed it, are online at our website at holycross.com. So we're already off to a bit of a hot season here in Western Colorado, and by hot we mean fire. For the third year in 4 running, we have a wildfire actively burning in the Holy Cross service territory. This one, the Sylvan Fire above Sylvan Lake between the Eagle Vale Valley and the Roaring Fork Valley. At 3,775 acres as of tonight, despite the latest rains and the moist temperatures, the fire continues to grow and in fact is impacted already some portions of our electrical infrastructure in this area. It's against the backdrop of that growing fire risk in our area that tonight we are going to talk about not only our fire mitigation strategies, but a key element of those fire mitigation strategies, and that is inspecting our system and maintaining it to prevent it from starting the wildfires, but also to provide that reliable and resilient energy supply that you've come to depend on. This is an important part of our overall fire mitigation strategy, where we're not only looking at system inspection and maintenance, but we're changing out equipment, we're hardening our infrastructures, we're modifying the settings of the distribution system as we operate it. All things, topics that we'll talk about at our next online Kilowatt Talks events coming very, very soon. But tonight we want to focus on system inspection and maintenance and how Holy Cross is hardening our system to keep the lights on. And so with me tonight, I have our 2 operations vice presidents. First, Rick Arnold, who's our vice president of operations in the Eagle Vale Valley. He's been with Holy Cross since 1996, 24 years, and he'll be with us tonight as one of our 2 special guests. Our other special guest is Cody O'Neill. He's the vice president of our Glenwood District operations. Cody just celebrated 15 years of service to Holy Cross, having come on board in June 2006. So Rick, I want to start with you and invite you just to kind of share the basics. What do we do here at Holy Cross to maintain and inspect our distribution system to help keep the power flowing to all of our members?
Yeah, thank you, Bryan. So obviously, first and foremost is safety. We are concerned primarily or very much about the safety of our employees and the members. So we do whatever we can to keep our system as safe as we possibly can. And in addition to that, reliability obviously plays a key role. We want to keep the lights on to our members as often as possible. And then, of course, fire mitigation. Fire mitigation has played a key role in the maintenance that we've been doing over the last for many years, but we've really focused it on the last 5 years, just with the drought conditions that we have. So any robust maintenance system really starts with an inspection system. So we have basically 3 methods that we use for inspections, and that would be visual, thermal, and drones. So to start off with visual, anytime our guys are in the field, we look at the equipment that we are at to make sure that the integrity of that equipment is sound. We look for arcing. If we open equipment, we look for moisture content in there. We look for any leaks or cracks and bushings. So that's a big part of it, and that happens every day. And we do that just to make sure that every piece of equipment we are at is going to last and is going to be a reliable piece of equipment for us. And then in addition to just the day-to-day visual inspections that we do, we actually have scheduled inspections that we do to where we'll look at primary pieces of equipment on an annual basis. And we'll just make sure that we hit all those key points to make sure that equipment is in the order that it needs to be to rely or to give reliable power. Then a second method that we've been using for quite some years now is thermal inspections. So thermal inspections, you use an infrared camera, and basically what you're doing is looking for hot spots on the system, right? If you have an electric system, if there's a point where the electricity is not flowing the way it should, it's going to heat up that element. And that could be a clamp, it could be anything in there that may not have the electrical connectivity that we need. So we'll look at that, and there will be a heat signature on that image, and it's going to show us, hey, we have a hot spot here. It's something that we need to look at. We have a couple employees that are Thermography 1 certified, so they not only know how to take a good image of that picture, or take a good image of the structure they're looking at, but also they can evaluate that image to make sure what's going on in the image. And for the most part, these inspections are done after hours. We try to do it in the wintertime to where we have a loaded system, because that way you see temperature differentials or greater temperature differentials. And in addition, we try to do them when the sun is not shining. So a lot of times we'll get out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and do our inspections. That way you don't have the sun that's hitting our lines and causing different heating temperatures on the line. So we try to take as many variables out of it as we can to make sure the image that we have is a good image. And then we evaluate the temperature difference on that. And then once we gather that information, sometimes later that day we'll go out and change out a clamp or a hot piece of equipment if we feel that it's necessary to get to it immediately.
So I got a question for you, Rick. So the focus on thermal, it allows you to see where there's an inefficiency and a breakdown in the system that allows things to heat up. Why is that important in the context of fire mitigation?
Well, any time that you have heat on an electric system, you have, I'll just say a pinch point, or there can be arcing that's involved. If there's arcing, there's the possibility of hot embers falling to the ground. I've seen equipment where there's a hotline clamp, and you can see that it looks like somebody hit it with a welder. And all that molten metal can actually fall to the grass and create a fire.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question for you. For those that aren't familiar with the components of the electrical system, let's take a pole or a transformer. What are the typical lifetimes? When you install something, how long do you expect that to last? And then kind of a related question, how often are we going around and doing this kind of visual and thermal inspection?
So how long do we expect our equipment to last? As long as possible. We we have equipment out in the field that's been out there for 20 plus years, and it's still rock solid. So, we have to look at that equipment all the time. We could install something in the field that fails tomorrow. And that's the variable that's involved. You could have equipment out there for 20 plus years, and it is just humming along and doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So you don't know when failure is going to happen. There's a lot of external elements that can cause failure to that piece of equipment. How was it taken care of even before it was installed? How was it installed? Was it installed properly? Was the proper torque, put on the hotline clamp? All those things will affect how long that piece of equipment will last. And then that's why we try to go out and do thermal inspections. We focused on thermal inspections on points right outside the substations. Okay. Places are some of our key areas that for reliability. If something fails close to the substations, that means everything downline that's probably going to go off. Mm-hmm. Once we completed that those thermal inspections, we went to the high or extreme fire danger areas and started inspecting that equipment, because we're like, okay, these are the pieces of equipment that we do not want to fail in a catastrophic way to where it could possibly start a fire. So we went there. We're into the high fire danger and even starting to get closer to just the moderate fire danger because of our inspection system. But a lot of times we start in January and work up until, say, April or May for the thermal inspections. That's our main season. That's when some of the maintenance is hard to actually do because of the elements outside, but it's a great time. So there's a little bit of downtime there, but it's a great time because of the cold temperature and the high loads.
So we've been talking about visual and thermal inspections. Those are done typically by crews at the ground level, but there are now new technologies that are out and about that allow us to do inspections from above. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, and Cody's taken a real key role in the drone inspections this year, and we've yielded great results. But Cody, do you want to talk a little bit on drones?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. Brian, that's a really good point. There's a lot of new technology that has come on board really just in the last 2 years. Holy Cross tried a drone inspection program, I think 4 years ago, and the technology just wasn't quite there yet. But camera improvements and drone battery improvements over the last 4 years have really gotten us to a place where we can realistically inspect our overhead electric system using drone technology. And the big reason why we want to use drones to inspect these overhead lines is really where the things happen on an overhead system is generally on top of the pole. And with our linemen and from the ground, we can't inspect the top of the pole without de-energizing that line. Mm-hmm. So these drones allow us to, from a safe distance, the drone pilot can fly over the right-of-way, they can stop at the pole, and they can take pictures from different angles above the pole, allow us to see all the components, the wire, the cross arms, look for anything that just isn't right. We've seen hairline cracks that 2 months from then, if we didn't fix it, could have caused a significant outage or possibly even, done damage to something on the ground. And it also gives us an opportunity to take pictures of the right-of-way, look for trees that have encroached on the right-of-way. It's really, it's a great technology. It's something that I think from a technological standpoint is only going to get better moving into the future. And our goal is to inspect our entire overhead system, which is it's about 1,100 miles of overhead line. And really, when you think about it, that's a lot of line out there. Given our service territory, that's a lot of line. And we can do this. If we get this done according to our schedule this year, we're going to complete 2,500 poles of the 20,000 poles we have on the system in about 6 weeks. That's a lot faster than our linemen or our inspectors could do this, by foot.
So if I'm a member and I see a drone over a power line, how do I know that it's an official Holy Cross thing versus the neighbor kid flying the drone around the neighborhood?
Sure. Great question. One of the first things I would ask that our members do is give that drone pilot some space. He's operating. These are not toy drones. These are drones with, roughly a 3-4 foot diameter.
Okay.
Give the pilot some space, approach them with caution, ask who they are. And then once you find out who they are, definitely give us a call. Give Holy Cross a call into Holy Cross Dispatch, and let them know where you're at and about what time you saw this drone, and they can confirm for you whether or not it's Holy Cross's contractor or whether or not it's someone else flying.
You mentioned the drones are also useful for looking at rights-of-way, and I presume by that you mean vegetation growing into the rights-of-way. Vegetation management is obviously a big part of keeping the lights on, but also keeping our area safe from wildfire. You want to say a little bit about some of the other things that we're doing in that regard?
Absolutely. Holy Cross, about 10, 12 years ago, Holy Cross embarked on a pretty comprehensive vegetation management cycle. Our goal is to get through that entire 1,100 miles of overhead line that we have once every 5 years. And what we try to do is we try to cut each tree species to a level that they will not be within 10 feet of our line over the course of that 5 years. very different from the approach that a lot of other utilities take. We think it's really important. Tree-caused outages are a big issue for any electric utility, and especially for us in these dry times. We definitely don't want any trees contacting our line. Trees are conductive, and if a tree starts on fire, it can start a lot of things on fire. So that's our standard vegetation management cycle. A new activity that we are going to embark on this year is clearing what we call the fine fuels away from the base of the pole. The arcing and the molten metal that Rick mentioned earlier falling from the pole to the ground, that's what can start a fire. Well, it's not necessarily going to start a tree on fire, but it can start dry grass on fire. It can start dead leaves that have accumulated at the base of that pole on fire. So we have a contractor that's going to be going into the highest concentration of combination of fire danger areas with poles that have equipment on them. The more equipment, the more stuff that could possibly fail. And we're gonna start that pilot program this summer. We're gonna see how it goes, and I anticipate it's something that we'll continue to do moving forward throughout the system in future years.
So if a member has a concern about a tree that they may see leaning that looks like it's going to fall into the right of way or contact or something, what should they do?
Please don't hesitate to call us. We actually had multiple phone calls on a tree in the Carbondale area that was leaning on some overhead cables. Turns out it was some communication lines, and we would much rather go check that stuff out and learn that it's not electric, and then contact the proper communication company and let them know what's going on, rather than somebody just ignore it and say, oh, somebody else will get to it.
Right.
We don't want to do that. So please give us a call. Our crews will go out and look at it, and we'll make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, and in addition to that, one thing we don't want our members to do if there's a tree that's leaning towards a power line is to try to attempt to cut that tree down themselves, because that can lead to disaster.
So leave that to the professionals, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I presume the same advice if they see something that doesn't look right in terms of the lines on the pole or a piece of equipment or something on the ground. From a safety perspective, we don't want them touching that either.
No, we don't. Absolutely. So if you see something on our system that you think looks totally out of place, we would like a phone call. And you talked about flying drones around power lines. That's another no-no. You don't want to fly drones, kites, anything around power lines, because they're energized to 25,000 volts, and interaction with a power line like that is it could be fatal.
Yeah. From time to time, I know our members are going to see our crews in the field, possibly doing system inspection, possibly doing some repairs or other functions. When you see a crew or a set of crew trucks out in the field, what can you do as Holy Cross members to help them get their job done?
Wow. One of the biggest concerns I have for my crews when they're out in the field, especially when they're on a roadway, is traffic. We have a lot of processes in place to make sure we do everything right when we're working around 25,000 volts. One of the variables that is hard to control is traffic. So if you get into a cone zone or you see our employees working along the road or anywhere, just please slow down in those cone zones, and also just give them breath as far as they are engaged in a very dangerous activity out there. And the better they can stay focused, the safer it is for everybody, especially during outages. A lot of times the crews will be out on outages, and you have a lot of members that are curious, what's going on. And we love to interact with our members. That's just not the time to do it. So after the outage, the lights are on, we'd love to explain to you, hey, this is what happened, here's what we did. But just give those guys room until the outage is restored, and then we'll be happy to come out and explain anything that you would like us to explain.
So I'm glad you brought up outages, because I know sometimes members, it's kind of a black box. Like, the power goes out and then all of a sudden it comes back on and I didn't do anything, or I called and they said it would be an hour and maybe it's a little bit shorter, maybe it's a little bit longer. You've had experiences on both sides of the equation, Rick, in your past career at Holy Cross, working in our dispatch and now heading up our operations. talk about what happens when something fails on the system, because it invariably does. What happens next? Everything, from the point at which the outage is detected all the way through to the time that the crews complete the repair work.
Okay, so it goes through a sequence, and it really depends upon what time of the day. If it's a weekend, because if it's a weekend, we call people out. If it's during the weekday, they're already working. But what happens is usually the first indication goes into dispatch. It might be a phone call, but now with the AMI meters, we almost know immediately when we have a widespread outage. So we can, or a piece of equipment opens. If we have a breaker open, we see it immediately. And that is a cue to the dispatchers that, okay, we need to get operation crews headed that direction. So as soon as dispatch finds out that we have some outage going on or an anomaly hits our system, they're going to dispatch the crews. The crews are going to then basically hopefully drop what they're doing, depending on if they're in the middle of a scheduled outage. That complicates things. But we try to attend to non-scheduled outages as soon as possible because we have no idea what caused the outage.
Right.
It could be a power line down across the highway. Mm-hmm. So our first thing is our main priority, as we talked about, is safety. So we get out there and we try to secure the scene. Right, we make sure that everybody is staying away from the area where we feel the incident occurred. And it could be anything from a tree in the power line to a vehicle hitting a transformer. So we get out there, secure the scene, make sure everything's safe, and then our guys will go through the procedure to go ahead and get the lights on as soon as possible. And sometimes that takes 30 minutes if it's a relatively easy outage. Sometimes it can take 6 hours. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on what happens on the system, as to how long it's going to take us to get those lights back on.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Cody, you mentioned that 1,100 miles of our system are above ground, but that means that the rest of it is below ground. How do we inspect and maintain that portion of our system? Because obviously it's a little bit harder to get to. And then, we see members from time to time saying, hey, the transformer box, the switch gear, the element of infrastructure that's there, it's, no disrespect, it's olive green and ugly, and I want to plant some bushes around it. What are some of the pieces of advice that you've got to keep them safe as they're digging in and around places where we might have our infrastructure?
Okay. That's a really good question, Brian. So, 1,100 miles of overhead line, 1,800 miles of underground line. So that's a lot. And as far as the digging is concerned, the first thing that anyone has to do if you're going to put a shovel in the ground is call Colorado 811, also known as UNCC, Utility Notification Center of Colorado. It's actually a required law for all, even homeowners that want to plant a tree or a bush. And it's a free service to the person that is doing the digging or the excavating. They call Colorado 811, and Colorado 811 then knows by the location, I need to let these 5 utility companies know because they have facilities in the ground there. Those facility owners have 3 business days to go out and get those locates done. And then the person that's doing the digging knows based on the paint or the flags on the ground, okay, I've got this here and this here and this here, and I need to avoid those things. Mm-hmm. So that's really the first thing they need to do from a digging standpoint. The adder I would put on there that was not exactly your question, but I have to say is if you want to plant something around one of these, in my opinion, beautiful green boxes, give us a call, get a hold of us, and we got some standards with that because our linemen that go out and work on this equipment, they need adequate and appropriate space to be able to work on it. So we've got distances that need to be maintained for any kind of vegetation or fence or anything that gets put around the transformers or the switchgears.
Now, I've seen some of these are painted. Is that cool? I mean, can people get together and artistically spruce them up a bit?
Historically, Bryan, yes, we have allowed people to paint our pad-mounted equipment. It is not necessarily something that we completely encourage, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. There's safety stickers on those pieces of equipment that we need to make sure, from our operations perspective, do not get covered up. There's warning stickers. There's things that tell the linemen where they are on the system.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in painting a transformer, give us a call. We'll talk through whatever the case may be, and we'll go from there. How's that?
Yeah, fair enough. And the underground portion of the system, how do we inspect and maintain it relative to the above ground that we talked about earlier?
It's a lot more difficult. Technology has not necessarily come up with a foolproof way to test that underground cable. Mm-hmm. There's some different options out there. They're pretty technical and nerdy, quite frankly. And I think it's great. But we've tried some of them, and we found that the results and the effort and cost weren't there. And really, underground cable technology has increased vastly in the last 20, 30 years. And the cable we buy now, we feel pretty confident that the cable itself probably has a 60 to 80 year lifespan. It's the end componentry that might have a little bit less lifespan, but we'll keep on with those technologies. We'll continue to learn more about them and see what we can do for those inspections of the parts we can't see.
Okay.
And like Cody said, it's the end components or the termination points that typically fail. So those are actually in the green boxes, and you can do visual and thermal inspection on those. And we certainly, if we see a swollen elbow, or oil, we'll go out and fix it, make those repairs.
So I can't resist asking this question that I know many of our members always ask. What is the most common reason that they experience a power outage at their house? And does it differ between the Eagle Vale Valley and Glenwood Roaring Fork?
Well, I think if I had to put a number on it, I think weather is our biggest issue, whether it's lightning or whether it's a snowstorm or even the rain, which I guess you could say this is a combination of weather and animals.
Okay.
We have a lot of issues with birds. When birds try to build nests on our poles, those dry sticks up there are fine, but as soon as they get wet, they'll allow electricity to conduct and they'll cause an outage. So that's my answer for Glenwood.
For Glenwood. What about for Eagle Vale?
Well, I would say that vegetation is a huge issue. It's really difficult to keep the vegetation at a level that it's not going to encroach on our lines. And it's not just because we're not out there trimming, because we are on a very regimented cycle, but there are trees outside of the right-of-way. A very healthy aspen, a green aspen, that can still fall over in a windstorm and cause an outage on that. And Cody talked a little bit about animals or birds, and we have spent a lot of time putting what we call brown board on our pole tops to keep those branches. What will happen is they'll try to drop a branch on that pole top or the cross arms, and it just sheds those branches so they can't stay up there.
Yeah.
So I bet we spend a large amount of time actually making sure what we call raptor protection, making sure that we try to keep birds and animals away from off of them.
So I hear thunder in the background, which motivates my next question, since there's also been a series of mudslides that have closed the I-70 corridor. We're seeing these kinds of extreme weather events happen more and more in our area. Does that impact operations? Because we have crews in both valleys that are able to respond to outages. But let's say that I-70 is closed and there's a really big outage in Rifle. And Cody, you don't have enough people to respond to it because it's a very large one. What do you do then? What happens next?
Well, we're going to do the very best we can. Rick's group is going to do the very best they can in their valley. If we really needed help, if it were safe to do so and Cottonwood Pass were open, we would probably try to send some guys over Cottonwood Pass. But even that road, for those people that are watching here that have been over Cottonwood Pass, it's tough for our guys to navigate with those bigger trucks. So we would want to keep that to a minimum. But I think just for peace of mind, Bryan, and for everybody watching, realistically, we are the same company. We operate in two different valleys, but in the grand scheme of things, we're going to do the best we can with the resources we have, and we're going to get the lights back on as soon as we possibly can.
Would you ever call out to a neighboring utility, an XL Energy or a Grand Valley or somebody else that could get here and help us out?
Sure. If the outage was that extensive, which I honestly don't know the last time the Holy Cross had to call for mutual aid, but if the outage were that extensive, the Colorado cooperatives have a mutual aid agreement where we can call at any time and say, we need mutual aid. And any cooperative that has the resources and the willingness to do so will come help us out. Happens quite often on the Front Range where they've had real bad windstorms. And in fact, one of our crews went down to Poudre Valley Rural Electric in Fort Collins in March of this year to help out.
That was East Troublesome Fire and ice storms and all sorts of things that happened. Rick, you were at our Coulee Mesa facility near Gypsum the night that we got the call during the Grizzly Creek fire that we might have to evacuate the area. Tell us what that was like when you got the phone call and some of the things that we did to make sure that we could maintain continuity of operations in that valley.
Right. So at that Coulee Mesa facility, we do keep a lot of equipment there, including our overhead poles. So it's something that we want to make sure we protect. And quite honestly, the location of that facility allows for a great defensible space. We did go out and got a bush hog and basically mowed stuff to the ground to make sure that it wouldn't encroach on our buildings. But we actually have a very good defensible space around that facility. So what's scary to me more is the equipment that's actually out in the field, right? I mean, it's all over the valley. So it's those poles, that equipment that I'd probably have more concern of than actually what's going on in the facility. And then if we needed to, as Cody alluded to, we have the same equipment over here and we just have to get it over to that side. But it was a little nerve-wracking.
Imagine.
Just because a lot of our folks live in that area. So
yeah. So how, Cody, I'll ask you this question. As we see more and more of these extreme weather events coming our way, what are some of the steps that Holy Cross members can take to protect their home, their business, their family members? How do we prepare for this stuff, whether it's a wildfire, whether it's the flash floods that we've seen this week in the canyon? How do we adapt to these changing circumstances?
I think the biggest thing is just be aware and be prepared. When it comes to potential evacuations for fires, up at my home, we kind of have a grab bag ready. We know where things are that are irreplaceable that we want to take with us. So for every family to, as weird as you think it might be, or as weird as it feels when you're talking about it, it's a good exercise for everyone to go through to be able to say, if I get that police officer that knocks on my door at 2:00 in the morning, we need to be ready to go. So for people to be prepared in that way, first and foremost, responsibility is protect yourself, get somewhere safe. Yeah. From an energy standpoint, there's different things we can do as if we own our homes, energy efficiency things to use less power. There's battery storage that's possible now, and Holy Cross is doing some really neat things to make that more accessible to some of our members. Really what it comes down to is what are the legitimate issues that you might be faced with where you live, and how can you be best prepared to face those? And there's lots of resources online for us as well.
And one of the challenges is, you expect to flip the light switch and the lights come on, right? If it's night, or you push the button and the garage door opens. So have a flashlight ready, because if it happens at night, you're going to be stumbling around in the dark if the power is off. Know how to open your garage door if the electricity's off. That's a big deal. Or your car may be inside and
you're not.
Right.
You're not.
And you really don't want to just back through the garage door.
Yeah, some other suggestions that and I grew up in California in earthquake country. It was always have your medications and food for yourself and for your animals, a ready supply of water, important documents, because especially in a fire, if you don't have a fireproof safe, and even then that doesn't work. So you want to have important documents, back them up in the cloud, put them online so that you have copies of them and you can at least verify that these are your documents, and you can get them later on down the road if the originals do happen to be destroyed. So, FEMA, the Department of Homeland Security, ready.gov, lots of good resources there. Unfortunately, it's a reality of our life here in this area with some of the natural hazards that we're facing. If someone had told me upon coming to Holy Cross to become the CEO that I would have had 3 wildfires and a global pandemic in the first 4 years, I don't know. I might have stayed in my comfortable little home and hunkered down for a little bit.
I was curious if there's any cause and effect.
Yeah, there's no cause and effect. It's not my fault. So last question I've got, and then we'll go to the chat and see if we've got any questions from out there in the interland. What are linemen like?
They're awesome. I'll be honest with you. I'm an engineer by education. I started my career out in the power industry on the engineering side of the world. I come from a construction family, so I really enjoy working with these guys. They're great. The entire operations group, the mechanics, the warehouse, the meter shop, the tree trimmers, the linemen, they're all awesome people to work with, just like everybody here at Holy Cross. It takes a dedicated employee to do what these guys do, day in, day out, night in, night out, no matter the weather, no matter the time. They're great people to work with.
Rick, what's your in your 24 years, what is the story, the experience that you've had at Holy Cross that sort of sticks in your mind as that's the thing that you're going to remember?
Probably we had I was still working in dispatch, and at the time it was Easter, and I was working obviously on a Sunday, and we had a snowstorm come through Vail, and fortunately most of our outages occur in one valley or the other. When there's a really bad outage that occurs, and it was nonstop for probably 10 hours to get the lights back on, and that event I will never forget.
And these guys, and they're mostly guys, but there are female line workers as well, all throughout our industry. I mean, they do what it takes. They go into the high country. They break trail in head-high snow. They work in 100-degree environments with, vegetation all around. I mean, it's really impressive what they do to make sure that they can keep the lights on for our members.
Yeah, I have some great photos of what these guys have, the elements that they fight to keep the lights on, and they love it.
They love it, but they also deserve our thanks, right?
They do. And, Cody and I basically have to keep an eye on them during extended outages to make sure we get them out of the field after 18 hours. And you basically have to drag them out of the field and say, go home and get some sleep, and then you can come back, because they don't like going home before the lights are on.
So how do you become a lineman? I think, Bryan, the best thing to do is there's some various schools out there. There's 2 paths. One path is to go to a school. Some of these are as short as 3 months, and some of them are as long as 2 years at some of the community colleges. You learn some basic electric theory and learn how to, what the pieces and parts are and things like that. Path number 2 is basically you go straight to work for a utility company or a contractor. And I would really recommend anyone that is interested in line work in the electric utility industry start exploring that. do some research, go talk to your local utility. It's not for everyone, as I've heard Rick say before, and as I've heard a lot of the crews say. But for those people that do find it enjoyable, it's a very rewarding career.
Rick, Cody, thank you very much, guys. It's great to have you in here. Talk about how we're keeping our system well maintained, well inspected, free of vegetation, or at least nearly free of vegetation to the extent possible. Learned about birds and sticks and linemen and all sorts of good topics that are critically important to keeping the lights on and keeping the rates low, which we know is important to all of you as Holy Cross members. So I want to thank you guys again, and I want to thank all of you for viewing this Kilowatt Talks online virtual event. We'd love to hear what you thought of this afternoon's event. So visit our Facebook page or our website at holycross.com and post a comment or review there. If you've got a suggestion for a topic for an upcoming event, something that you want to hear about, post that there as well. Let us know what you want to hear. Watch your email or visit our website for information on our next Kilowatt Talks. We're going to focus on the other side of the fire mitigation story. That is how we operate the system during times of high winds and stage 2 fire alerts and all the other things that sadly are becoming more and more commonplace in this beautiful area that we call home. And make sure that you invite your friends and your neighbors to join us. That'll be in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Until then, on behalf of all of us here at Holy Cross Energy, I wish you a safe and healthy rest of your summer. Get out there and enjoy this beautiful place that we love. And I look forward to seeing you either virtually or in person again very soon. Good night for now.